In 2024, Russia's official numbers boasted a 4.3% GDP growth, a figure that, at first glance, seemed to defy the odds. Many outside observers were surprised, as the country was under some of the harshest international sanctions in modern history, with its access to global markets and technology severely restricted. Defying expectations under heavy sanctions, Russia's economy appeared to be not just surviving, but thriving, at least on paper. The Kremlin promoted this as proof of economic resilience and a successful pivot to self-sufficiency, using state media to highlight the numbers and reassure the public that Russia was weathering the storm. But beneath the surface, this so-called boom was almost entirely driven by a surge in government spending on the war effort. The state poured unprecedented funds into defense, fueling a rapid expansion in military-related industries. The economy was retooled into a militarized machine, with sectors like metal products and electronics growing by over 30%, all to supply the front lines. Civilian factories were converted to produce weapons, ammunition, and military vehicles, leaving little room for consumer goods or innovation. This wasn't innovation or consumer demand, it was relentless production of military hardware, with factories running around the clock to meet the needs of the conflict. Such growth is unsustainable, creating an artificial boom that diverts resources from health, infrastructure, and civilian innovation. Schools, hospitals, and public services are left underfunded, while the focus remains on the war machine. The war economy consumes the nation's future for immediate military needs, leaving other sectors to wither. Civilian projects are delayed or abandoned, and the quality of life for ordinary Russians steadily declines. This is hollow prosperity, an illusion of strength masking deep structural weaknesses. The apparent growth is concentrated in a few sectors, while the broader economy faces stagnation and decline. While munitions factories are busy, the rest of the economy stagnates. Shelves in stores grow emptier and non-military industries struggle to survive. This kind of growth doesn't raise living standards or integrate Russia into the global economy. Instead, it isolates the country further, cutting off opportunities for trade, travel, and prosperity. It's the economic equivalent of a fever, frantic activity that signals underlying sickness. The numbers may look impressive, but they mask a deeper malaise. Russia's temporary surge is a symptom of burning through its resources to sustain conflict, sacrificing long-term stability for short-term survival. The 22 buttons den netzigen bosen to streiten. 22 sanctions sent shockwaves through the global economy, disrupting established trade flows and shaking financial markets to their core. Investors and policymakers alike scrambled to assess the fallout as uncertainty rippled across continents. Suddenly, a major supplier of oil, gas, and key commodities was cut off from much of the world. Energy markets convulsed, and industries dependent on Russian resources faced immediate challenges. Fears of shortages and recession loomed large, especially in Europe, which had long relied on Russian energy to power its homes, factories, and infrastructure. Headlines warned of blackouts and economic downturns. Households and businesses braced for higher costs, while governments rushed to implement emergency plans to keep the lights on and economies running. Yet, the world responded with remarkable adaptability. Within months, countries began rapidly decoupling from Russian resources, rerouting supply chains, and seeking alternatives. Nations turned to the US, Qatar, and Norway for liquefied natural gas and pipeline supplies, forging new energy partnerships at record speed. At the same time, they sought new suppliers for oil, metals, and grain, reaching out to South America, Africa, and Asia to fill the gaps left by Russia. This wasn't just about swapping suppliers, it triggered a fundamental reassessment of economic dependencies and vulnerabilities that had built up over decades. Governments and corporations pushed for diversification, forging new alliances and trade relationships to reduce risk and increase resilience. The crisis accelerated the trend toward more resilient, decentralized economic networks as countries invested in infrastructure and logistics to support new trade routes. Within just 2 years, the world demonstrated it could function, and even thrive, without relying on Russian resources. Initial price shocks and volatility gradually gave way to stability as new supply lines and partnerships matured. The global economy showed surprising flexibility and resilience, adapting to the new reality with innovation and determination. Russia's attempt to weaponize its exports ultimately backfired, forcing its former customers to build a new economic order that left Russia sidelined. The world moved on, forging ahead with new partners and leaving Russia more isolated than ever before. Europe's dependence on Russian energy became a crisis after the Ukraine invasion. The immediate scramble for alternative gas and oil was a stopgap, not a solution. The real shift was a dramatic acceleration of Europe's green energy transition. Political will surged, driving massive investment in wind, solar, and energy efficiency. Offshore wind farms and solar installations multiplied, while green hydrogen infrastructure advanced. Energy security became inseparable from renewables and independence. Russia's leverage as an energy supplier collapsed as pipelines ran dry. Even if relations normalize, Europe won't return to old dependencies. The continent has built a cleaner, more secure energy future, leaving Russia's main economic weapon obsolete. Russia's invasion exposed vulnerabilities in global supply chains for metals, grains, and industrial gases. Manufacturers feared disruptions, but lessons from the pandemic spurred rapid adaptation. Companies diversified suppliers, increased inventories, and reshored production where possible. Major economies quickly found alternatives for Russian materials: titanium from new sources, palladium from Africa and North America. The process was costly, but effective, proving Russia was not irreplaceable. The global system emerged more robust, with less risk of blackmail from any single nation. Economies are now better prepared for shocks, with flexible, diversified networks. Russia's ability to disrupt global markets has been sharply reduced. The world learned to root around Russian disruption, building lasting resilience. Behind the war economy's facade, Russia's government finances unraveled, revealing a deepening crisis that few outside the Kremlin anticipated. The outward appearance of control masked a growing sense of urgency within the halls of power, as officials scrambled to plug widening gaps in the budget. The budget, once buoyed by oil and gas, was gutted by sanctions and price caps. International restrictions slashed export earnings, and the global market's appetite for Russian energy shrank, leaving the government with far less revenue than it had counted on. Forced to sell oil at steep discounts, revenues plunged while war costs soared. The government's attempts to find new buyers could not make up for the losses, and the cost of sustaining the war effort only grew heavier with each passing month. By mid-2025, the deficit ballooned to nearly the full-year target, with oil and gas income down 14%. The fiscal gap widened at a pace that alarmed even seasoned analysts, raising questions about how long the government could keep up its current spending. The National Wealth Fund, once a safety net, was nearly drained. Years of careful accumulation vanished in months as reserves were tapped to cover urgent expenses and prop up the ruble. The government turned to domestic borrowing, crowding out private investment and stifling the civilian economy. Banks prioritized state needs, leaving entrepreneurs and small businesses struggling to access credit. Non-military sectors were starved of credit, deepening dependence on unsustainable state spending. The private sector shrank, and innovation stalled as resources were funneled into the war machine. Russia is mortgaging its future to pay for war today, creating a fiscal crisis that will linger. Investments in education, healthcare, and infrastructure were sacrificed, threatening the country's long-term prospects. The illusion of stability hides a government on the brink, as mounting debt and shrinking reserves cast a long shadow over Russia's economic future. War spending and a shrinking workforce overheated Russia's economy. Factories ran non-stop for military orders, but civilian goods lagged behind. Inflation soared above 10%, eroding purchasing power and fueling anxiety. The central bank hiked interest rates to 21%, trying to curb inflation, but stalling growth. After a brief boom, GDP growth slowed sharply, then contracted for the first time since 2022. The artificial high faded, exposing deep structural weaknesses. The outlook is bleak: weak growth, high inflation, and no easy way out. Continued spending means more inflation. High rates mean stagnation. Russia is trapped in a cycle of overheating and stagnation. The war economy's imbalance is now impossible to ignore. Russia faces a critical labor shortage. Hundreds of thousands mobilized or fled, many highly skilled. Unemployment hit record lows, but businesses can't find workers, especially for skilled jobs. Wage pressures fuel inflation, but the economy's productive capacity is capped. Sanctions disrupted supply chains, cutting off Western technology and components. The investment climate collapsed as foreign assets were seized and businesses handed to Kremlin loyalists. Rule of law gave way to political favoritism, scaring off investors. Modernization and productivity gains stalled as capital fled. The shrinking, less skilled workforce and toxic investment environment spell long-term decay. By gutting its own potential, Russia's becoming technologically backward and isolated. The war economy has mortgaged both present and future prosperity. As the world adapts, Russia grows increasingly isolated, politically and economically. Cut off from the West, Russia is excluded from the engines of global growth and innovation. Trade with China and India has grown, but on unfavorable terms, discounted oil, limited investment. Russia's now a junior partner, supplying cheap resources to more powerful neighbors. Isolation accelerates technological decline. Western expertise and machinery are out of reach. Import substitution is costly and can't replicate global innovation. Russian industries fall behind, producing less efficient, lower-quality goods. The economy grows more insular and less productive, driven by state commands, not competition. Without a major shift, Russia's global role will keep shrinking. The path leads not to greatness, but to stagnation and irrelevance. The world has emerged from Russia's shock more resilient, diversified, and forward-looking. Fears of global crisis proved unfounded as markets adapted and new partnerships formed. The shift to green energy and resilient supply chains is now permanent. The global economy is moving ahead, largely insulated from Russia's isolation. While Russia faces crisis and decay, the world focuses on innovation and sustainable growth. No single country is indispensable. Power comes from integration and trust. By rejecting these principles, Russia has marginalized itself. The world's path is one of resilience and adaptation, moving forward, with or without Russia.